Throughout this chapter, we've talked a lot about classifying costs as fixed or variable. And we've done this, we've talked about actual costs. So we've taken an actual cost and we said, hey, this is either a fixed cost or it is a variable cost. And while in the examples we've had, that's been relatively easy to do, in the real world, that's actually really, really hard. It's really hard to classify costs as fixed or variable. And there are several reasons for that. We've kind of talked about some of them. For one, as we talked about, the cost can be fixed or variable depending on the activity measure we use, and we've seen examples of that. If you change the activity measure, our cost can go from being fixed to variable or vice versa. Also, we knew fixed costs are only fixed within a relevant range. So, so that can make it hard in terms of deciding whether a cost is fixed or variable. And the final thing, if you think about in this example, let's say, sometimes it's really hard to figure out what's really driving a variable cost. Let's say that you have a school and you've decided that electric bills that powers all the lights and all the classrooms is a variable cost. And the more classes that you have, the more electricity that is being used, and you decide that this is a variable cost. Well, that works to some extent, but if you think about it, it's not perfect because some classes may not use electricity at all. They may keep the lights off. Some classes may end early. Some classes may stay late. Some may use more electricity. So there's a lot of problems in determining what is a variable cost and really what is a fixed cost. Fortunately for us, when we're doing managerial accounting, we don't have to use actual numbers. We can actually use estimated costs. We can estimate our fixed and variable costs basically. So if you see here, I have a table and I have my sales volume over here and I have a cost over here as well. So all of these are in dollars, which is $450,000, and that was in January when we sold 30,000 units. And this total cost is fixed and variable cost combined. So $450,000 is all the cost that I had in January, and during that month, the company sold 30,000 units. And I have all the months, January through December. So if I want to use this to figure out what my fixed and variable costs are, there are several methods that we can use. The first method we're going to look at is called the high-low method. And the way this works is we're going to identify the month that we had the highest volumes of sales and the month that we had where we had the lowest volumes of sales. And we'll use that to determine our variable cost and then our fixed cost. So I'll show you exactly how it works. So if we look at this table right here, you can see that during July right here, this was the high point. We had 40,000 units sold. That is the highest number of units sold during that year. And if you look over here in May, this was a low point. We had only 10,000 units sold in May. So we can use these numbers to get an estimate of what our fixed and variable costs are. So based on these points, we know that our low point units sold is 10,000. So 10,000 units, and we know that the cost of selling those 10,000 units was $180,000. And then we know at a high point, which occurred in July, that we sold 40,000 units. And we know our total cost for the month of July was $350,000. So to calculate our variable cost per unit, it's going to equal our change in cost divided by our change in units. So in this case, our change in cost would be $350,000 minus 180,000. And our change in units would be 40,000 minus 10,000. So if you work all this out, you're going to get a variable cost of $5.67 per unit. And this is actually $5.66667. And I actually just rounded it up to $5.67. So this is our variable cost per unit. So we used our high-low method to figure out our variable cost per unit, and then from that we can figure out our fixed cost. We know our equal. And what we want to try to solve for this is the fixed cost. So we can just rearrange the equation such that our fixed cost equals our total cost minus our variable cost. And from here we just solve the simple equation, and the numbers we're going to use are either from our high month, which was in July, or our low month, which was in May. So we're going to use either the low month or the high month. We're not going to use any other month we have to use one of these months or it won't work out. So let's just start with the high month and see what happens. So for our high month, our fixed cost is going to equal our total cost, and the total cost for the high month was $350,000. So $350,000 minus our variable cost, which is 5.67 times 40,000 units. And if you work this out, you get a fixed cost of $123,333. And this was using a high point. So I'll put high point. Now you may have gotten a slightly different number because I actually rounded to get this at 5.67. I think when you actually work this out, I used 5.66667 and something. So you may have gotten a slightly different number, but your number should be really close to $123,333, and that is our fixed cost. So we've used the high-low method to calculate our variable cost, which is 5.67 dollars per unit, and our fixed cost, which was $123,333. And remember, this is an estimate. This is our estimated variable cost or an estimated fixed cost, and it's much easier way than using or than doing it than using the actual cost. Now, just to make sure we're on the same page, what do you think the fixed cost would have been if we were to use a low point? And I hope that you're saying, well, it has to be the same, right? Because it is fixed. It should be $123,333. And if that's what you're saying, then you're exactly right. The fixed is always the same and it is fixed. And we can prove that. Our fixed cost will equal for our low point. Our total cost was $180,000 right here. So $180,000 we shall mark it over here. And then take out the variable cost, which would still be 5.67 times for our low point, 10,000 units right here. So 5.67 times 10,000. And if you work the math out, you will get $123,333. So the same thing that we got when we use the high point. Fixed cost stays the same basically. Alright, so we've used the high-low method to figure out our fixed and our variable costs, and you should know that this is just one method of estimating fixed and variable costs. So let's look at another method. The next method that we're going to look at now, it's called the scatter graph method. And the scatter graph method will actually tell us how good our estimates were from the high-low methods. So we can use the scatter graph to see if the high-low method actually came up with good estimates.